ለመማር ወደ ትምህርት ተቋም መሄድ ግድ አይደለም።
ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
ራሳችሁን ከኮሮና ቫይረስ ወረርሽኝ እየጠበቃችሁ በቤታችሁ ወይም በተመቻችሁ ቦታ
በኢንተርኔት አማካኝነት በኦንላይን ትምህርታችሁን መከታተል ይቻላል።
ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና
ከእንግሊዙ ኢንስቲትዩት ኦፍ ኮመርሻል ማኔጅመንት ICM ጋር በመተባበር የሚሰጡ ትምህርቶችን ተከታትላችሁ በ6 ወር ጊዜ በዓለም አቀፍ ደረጃ ተቀባይነት ያለውን የስልጠና ማስረጃ ባለቤት መሆን ይቻላል።
ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና ባገኘንባቸው የፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን እና የሆስተስ ስልጠናም በምዝገባ ላይ ነን።
ጥያቄና መልስ፣ የክፍል ስራዎች ብሎም ፈተና መፈተን ክፍል ውስጥ እንዳላችሁ አይነት
ልምድ ባላቸው መምህራን እየተማራችሁ
በኦንላይን ባላችሁበት ቦታ
አድራሻ ከ22 ማዞሪያ ወደ ሾላ ገበያ በሚወስደው መንገድ 150 ሜትር ገባ ብሎ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ
የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ
ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Okay, let's start. Today we are going to start the third chapter, which is about the theory of money. The objective of the chapter is to make you equal about the various theories of money that are relevant for policy decision. Therefore, at the end of this chapter, you are expected to understand the various theories. Specifically, you are expected to know the classical quantity theory of money, and you could also understand the specific policy relevance of the classical quantity theory. The other is the Cambridge approach to money demand, and what is the argument of the Cambridge approach to money demand. We will also see the Friedman quantity theory of money demand. Therefore, at the end of this chapter, you are expected to understand these theories and their specific arguments as well as their policy relevance. The classical theory of money. Generally, the classicalists argued that the interest rates have no effect on the demand for money. We will see the justification behind this statement later. The common classical theories under the scope of this discussion are the velocity of money and the equation of exchange and the quantity theory. Therefore, let's see each theory screenshot. Velocity of money and the equation of exchange. The classicalists' quantity theory approach is largely aligned with the common American economist, the Irving Fisher, who has written an influential book entitled as The Purchasing Power of Money, that is written almost a century back. And Fisher has tried to link the money supply and the nominal GDP. If you remember, in the previous chapter, we have assigned the money supply with the letter N. It is nominal as well. And Fisher tries to make a connection between the money supply and the nominal GDP, which you know is defined as the total spending on final goods and services that are produced in the economy. And if you remember, this nominal GDP is equivalent with the output times that of the price. Therefore, what Fisher connects is this money and that of the nominal GDP. Therefore, the velocity of money tells you the link between money and that of nominal GDP, or the total spending within the economy. Here, some of you from the natural science background, you may know velocity as a basic term in physics, right? Here in monetary economics, velocity is to mean the rate of turnover of money, meaning the rate of circulation of the money within the economy. And this velocity is measured in terms of the average number of times per year that the dollar or birr in our context is spent in the buying of the total goods and services. Therefore, it tells you the number of times that the money is revolving for the transaction that is to be used in the goods and services that are produced within the economy. Here, Fisher has tried to put the connection between the velocity, the money, and that of the nominal GDP. He drives the velocity as equivalent to price times output over the money. Therefore, velocity is the ratio of the nominal GDP to the money in. For instance, let's see using figures. So, you know that from your introduction to economics, you know GDP is measured per year, right? And here, let's consider the nominal GDP, meaning it is not adjusted for price. Therefore, the nominal GDP, let's assume, is 5 trillion birr in A. And the total quantity of money is, say, 1 trillion. 1 trillion. Therefore, here, the velocity of a unit of this dollar, the velocity is 5. What does it mean? This is to mean that averagely, the dollar is spent 5 times in purchasing the final goods and services within the economy, meaning it has circulated 5 times within the economy for the purpose of the transaction in the final goods and services within the considered economy. Therefore, here, velocity has linked the nominal GDP and the quantity of money. Here, you can make or you can convert this V equals to P times Y over M, just crisscross it. And you find out M times V equals to primes times output. Therefore, we are converting the form of the equation. When you make the equation, and in this equation, on the left side, you observe that there is MV, the money and the velocity. And this would have to be equivalent with the nominal GDP. Therefore, when you convert equation 1 into this form, you find the equation of exchange. Therefore, what does this equation tell you? This equation is telling you that the quantity of money times the number of times that this money is spent, which we have referred it as velocity, would have to be equivalent with the nominal income or the nominal GDP, which we are referring in a year. Therefore, using these connections, you can make some arguments. For instance, what will happen if there is a rise in M, in the quantity of money? What will happen? Therefore, in order to keep the equality, though M has increased, the equation will be balanced if and only if there is a fall in V. What does it mean? As the quantity of money is increased, it would have to result in the fall of the velocity of money, which keeps the left side equation as constant or unexchanged. Thus, Irving Fisher has justified that velocity is as well determined by the institutions within the economy, the policies or the existence of financial institution matters for the velocity of money, as well as their policy. And here is in doubt that velocity is determined by institutions, and this has also the effect on the way how individuals conduct transactions. He tried to put, for instance, with the availability of institutions that makes people use credit cards. This can result in the requirement of less money. Therefore, the decrement in the amount of money when it results in decrement of M, it results in the increment of V, which is the velocity of money. Therefore, there is a compensating effect with each other, by which at the end of the day will maintain its equilibrium. However, the question is how fast these institutions or the provision of these institutional technologies affects the velocity of money. As per the research outputs and the theoretical foundation of Fisher, these institutional as well as technological features will affect the velocity only slowly over time. Therefore, here, velocity will be reasonably constant in the short term, because the effect of the technologies is reported to have a slower effect in this velocity, and the effect will be magnified over time. As a result, it is possible to justify that velocity is reasonably constant in the short term. Thus, the velocity is considered to be fairly constant in the short term in the theory of money, which is referred as quantity wave. And this now we are just moving to explain how the constancy of the relative constancy of the velocity is connected with the nominal GDP and that of the money in general. Therefore, this quantity theory states that nominal income is mainly or solely determined by the movements in the quantity of money. Why? The question is why? Because we have assumed that, and Fisher have proved that, the technologies have less effect in the short term. As a result, we put the velocity as fairly constant in the short term. That's the effect. The load will be transferred to money. Therefore, when the quantity of money, say for instance, doubles, the M times V will double. In the same fashion, the quantity theory has put as M times V equals to Py. When MV doubles, the equilibrium will be maintained through doubling the nominal GDP or the nominal income. For instance, if, say, the velocity is fixed to be 5, and the nominal GDP is 5 trillion as well, nominal GDP here is Py. Py is the nominal GDP. And the money supply is, say, 1 trillion. The quantity of money is 1 trillion. Therefore, what will happen on the GDP, on the nominal GDP, if, say, the National Bank of Ethiopia in our context doubles the money supply to 2 trillion, this quantity theory will put the doubling of the nominal income as well. And this is derived from, or the implication comes from, the change in the money supply. As a result, to maintain the balance, the nominal GDP will again be doubled to 10 trillion. That is from 5 to 10. Now, let's broaden our argument. I hope the basic philosophies of classical economists, right? And these classical economists thought that wages and prices are flexible because they are more interested in more market-oriented economy. And because of this flexibility, the economy under the normal circumstance or under the normal times will be in the level of full employment. Therefore, here, under full employment, it has an implication on the equation of exchange. Therefore, it is fully employed. What does mean full employment? I hope you know it very well. If all inputs are fully employed, if the economy is at the stage of full employment, this means that in the equation of exchange, the nominal GDP or the nominal income will also be constant because we are on the stage of full employment. Then what will happen? Now, what will happen if again money doubles, money supply doubles? Therefore, the quantity theory of money tells you that doubling of the money supply will result in the doubling of the price. Why? Because we are talking in the short run where velocity is constant and we are also on the stage of full employment. As a result, the nominal income is constant. Therefore, the variation for balancing the equation of exchange will fall on the money supply and that of the price. Therefore, this quantity theory of money is telling you that doubling the money supply will parallelly result in the doubling of the price level. For classical economists, the quantity of money for classicals, the quantity theory of money has provided an explanation of the movements in price level. Therefore, based on the justification above, the change or the movement or the variation in price level is sourced from changes in the quantity of money. This has a strong policy implication, particularly in the money market. Therefore, your money supply has a possibility of changing the price of the economy. Now, we are moving using this quantity theory of money. We are moving to drive the demand for money. It's possible to drive the demand for money equation from the quantity theory. Since the quantity theory of money is justifying the point where how much money is held by people for the income they have. When you convert the economy, this quantity of theory of money as well tells you how much money, the quantity of money held for the given amount of aggregate income. Therefore, we can write the quantity theory, the quantity equation of money demand in the form of M. Therefore, divide MV equals to PY divided by V. Then you are left with M here. Therefore, this is money demand that is derived from the quantity theory of money. And to maintain this equilibrium, particularly to maintain the money market in equilibrium, the quantity of money that individuals hold will have to be equivalent with the quantity of money they demanded. Therefore, we are going to put the equilibrium, the money market in equilibrium, where it tells you the point that the quantity of money that people hold equals to the quantity of money that they demand. Therefore, the demand here is at equilibrium. As a result, we can replace this M by MD, just for maintaining the equilibrium. Here, if you remember the previous slides that we have justified, V, velocity of money, is constant, right? Therefore, let's represent 1 over V, that is the inverse of the velocity, as K, which represents a constant. Therefore, it's possible to rewrite this equation by replacing 1 over V with letter K.
በትምህርት ከፍ ብሎ መብረር ይቻላል። ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ከከፍተኛ ትምህርት አግባብነትና ጥራት ኤጀንሲ ሙሉ ዕውቅናን ባገኘንባቸው በማስተርስ ዲግሪ ኤምቢኤ በስትራቴጂክ ማኔጅመንት፣ ኤምቢኤ በባንኪንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ ኤምቢኤ በቢዝነስ ሊደርሺፕ፣ ኤምቢኤ በሪስክና ኢንሹራንስ፣ ኤምኤስሲ በኢንተርናሽናል ትሬድ እና ኢኮኖሚክስ ዘርፎች በእውቀት ለመቅረጽ የበቁ ፕሮፌሰሮቻችን አረንጓዴ መብራታቸውን አብርተዋል። በነገራችን ላይ በኬንያ ሀገር ከሚገኙ ስመጥር ዩኒቨርሲቲዎች በሚመጡ ፕሮፌሰሮች የትኩረት መስክ ትምህርቶቹ መሰጠታቸው ልዩ ያደርገናል። በምርጥ የትምህርት ስርዓት የተገነባው ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ በመጀመሪያ ዲግሪ በአቪዬሽን ማኔጅመንት፣ በሆቴል ማኔጅመንት፣ በአካውንቲንግ እና ፋይናንስ፣ በማርኬቲንግ ማኔጅመንት አስተማማኝ ትምህርት ይገቢውና ራስዎንና ሀገሮን ይለውጡ። አድራሻ 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።
Equation. Where is it? The above equation tells you that the money demand is equivalent with the constant which we have represented with K equals to P times Y. Still, this is the nominal GDP. Therefore, the above equation tells you that since K is constant, which represents 1 over B, it tells you that the level of transaction generated by the fixed level of nominal income determines the quantity of money demand. Why? Because we have assumed that the velocity is constant. As a result, the price times the output, which is the nominal GDP, determines the quantity of money demand. Therefore, here is a key concluding remark of Fisher's quantity theory of money is that demand for the money is purely a function of this nominal income rather than the interest rate. Therefore, interest rate in this money demand function has no effect because the money demand function here is written with the nominal GDP. Don't forget this point. Fisher has come to this conclusion because his argument is that, or his belief is that, why he tries to answer why people hold money. Basically, it is for transaction, for conducting transaction. As a result, if people aspire to hold the money only for transaction, there is no interest to put for instance, in financial institutions for earning interest rate. And he puts as well, his argument as well is supported with justifying the lack of freedom for people in terms of the amount they want to hold. Let's conclude. The demand for money now is determined by the transactions, which MD equals to KPY. Therefore, K is constant. Here, the money demand is being only affected by the nominal income. Secondly, he has also justified the importance of institutions in a way how they affect the transaction. how people are conducting the transaction. And hence it has a possibility of determining the velocity, which we have represented it as K. Now let's proceed to the second theory that explains about the money demand, the Cambridge approach to money demand. The Cambridge school, this is a school by itself, goes a different approach than the previous demand equations for money. Here, the Cambridge approach to money demand has justified the importance of the non-importance of the volume of transaction or the nominal income and velocity. Therefore, they do not take into consideration on the link between money demand and that of the volume of transactions and that of the velocity. And they extended their assumption for the purpose of money. And they put that there is flexibility in the holding right or the holding decision of people. And they try to remove the constraint by putting up of the technological and the institutional factors. As a result, this Cambridge school comes with a different approach by justifying interest rate is important. Therefore, they did not rule out the effect of interest rate on the demand for money. This is to mean they considered interest rate on the demand for money. For them, the function of money extends as well for a medium of exchange. And they can also use as a store of value. The previous theories that we have seen are not considering interest rate because they assume that money will be used only for a medium of exchange and not as a store of value due to institutional constraints, for instance. Therefore, this Cambridge school considers the importance of interest rate as they have extended the importance of money as a store of value. Therefore, when you store money, you will get interest rate. That is always right. And here, demand for money is said as a positive function of the volume of transactions, like in the case of the classicalist quantity theory of money demand. And here I have also justified the importance of money as a store of value. And this store of value is a function of the amount of wealth that individuals hold and about the expected relative return of the money as compared to other assets. Therefore, they tried to link the store of value with the amount of wealth that people had, and as well with the relative return of the money. Therefore, you know that wealth in nominal terms is proportional to nominal income, right? Therefore, this Cambridge school is putting a point where money demand as a store of value is also proportional to income, right? The more the income you have, the more the money demand to be stored, the more you store. That is the idea. They have also put a bond as the alternative to money. Specifically, if interest rate on bonds increases, then people will demand less money because there is a high return in the alternative assets such as bonds. Therefore, less money will be demanded as a store of value if there is an increment in the interest rate of the alternative assets such as bonds. Therefore, considering this Cambridge school, it is possible to summarize that the quantity of money and the Cambridge economists had developed a classical theory of money demand in which the demand for money is proportional to nominal income. However, we can put the difference of the two theories. Two theories are different. How? Where falls the difference? The quantity theory of money demand has emphasized on the technological and institutional factors, and they have ignored the importance of interest rate on the demand for money, particularly in the short term. However, the Cambridge economists counter-argue the importance of interest rate because they have extended the assumption of the function of money as a store of value. As a result, interest rate has the possibility of affecting the demand for money, which indirectly is being affecting the decision to hold money in general. ስለዚህ ሁለቱ ልዩነት እዚህ ጋር ነው ፎርም ያደርገው ማለት ነው። Now let's see the other theory, which is termed as the Friedman modern quantity theory of money. Friedman is known to have developed the common quantity theory of money with his article, The Quantity of Money, as a restatement. His research question starts by answering why people choose to hold the money. What is the function of holding the money? Or why people choose to have money? Therefore, aligning with Keynes, Friedman has tried to simplify things, particularly about the demand for money. He puts a comparative analysis between other assets and the demand for money. And the argument is that in the same fashion as of the demand for an asset, we can explain the demand for money. Therefore, it is possible to point out that the demand for money must be influenced by the same factors that affect the demand of any asset. Therefore, he tried to use the theory of asset demand to money. Therefore, he converts or he drives the demand, the money demand theory from the theory of the asset demand. And the theory of, the question is, what does the theory of the asset demand argue? The theory of the asset demand indicates that the demand for money should be a function of the resources available to individuals. For instance, the resource might be measured in terms of wealth, their wealth they have, and the expected return on other assets. Meaning, the demand for money now is considered with reference to the resources available to individuals, for instance, their wealth, and the comparative analysis between the return of assets and the return of money. You may ask me that money might be a thing, but here we are explaining two categories of assets. And here, Friedman has also recognized that people also want to hold a certain amount of money in real terms. As a result, by deriving from the demand for assets theory, the Friedman has expressed the money demand function, and he puts the real money here. You see that MD over P. This is the real money balance, because we have considered the price level here. Therefore, we can call it as real. And this demand for money is a function of the wealth individuals have, and is a function of as well the comparison of the expected return from money and the expected return from its alternative, for instance, bonds. And still the real money demand as well as a function of the expected return on equity, or with a comparative analysis of the expected return from equity and that of the expected return from money. Moreover, still, Milton Friedman has justified the real money demand as a function of the inflation rate and the return from money as well. You see the signs below these specific variables. For instance, under YP, there is a positive sign, right? This YP positive indicates that having more permanent income has a possibility of positive relationship with the real money demand balance. What does it mean? Those individuals who have high permanent income, which is considered in terms of free, have the possibility of demanding more money. Here we see RB minus RM is negative, right? RB is the return from bond and RM is the return from money. Therefore, this indicates that if the return from bond is greater than the return from money, people will look into convert the money into the alternative, that is bond. Therefore, their real money demand balance will decline. In the same fashion, you can consider for the expected return comparative analysis with the equity and that of the real money demand, which is still negative. And here, there is also the consideration of inflation and the real money demand. Here, pi E is to mean the inflation rate from goods and services, and RM is the return from money, for instance, from interest. Therefore, if the inflation rate is higher than the rate of the money that brings you, therefore you will not demand to have more real money balance. You will aspire to convert your money into assets, Therefore, you could understand the Friedman justification. And here's justification for linking the demand for money with that of income, as with the consideration of the business cycle. And that is, the money will not fluctuate as much with the business cycle movement. Therefore, the demand for money, as per Friedman, is comparative with the demand for or the demand for or the return from the alternative assets. When the return from bond, from equity, or from goods is high, then people wanted to hold more of these assets than the money. That is what the previous equation is explaining. For instance, I have already explained it, by the way. If the difference between the return from bond and the return from money, if it rises, what does it mean? RB minus RM ከፍ አለ ማለት ከቦንድ የምናገኘው ሪተርን ከፍ ያለ ነው። ከመኒ ፎር ኢንስታንስ ከኢንተረስት ሬት ሊሆን ይችላል የምናገኘው ሪተርን ዝቅ ያለ ነው ማለት ነው። Therefore, what people do is they will aspire to have bond instead of having the cash money. Therefore, the relative expected return on money is declining as compared to the return from bond. Therefore, the demand for money will fall here. The same applies for the expected inflation or the expected price change here. Here you see the pi E minus RM, meaning the inflation rate. That means the return that you gain from assets minus the return from money. If the return from money is getting down and down as compared to the return from assets, which is being measured here by inflation, then people will look into more capital goods. For instance, if the inflation rate is 10%, for example, and therefore if 10% inflation rate is to mean that the price of goods and services will increase at 10%, right? Therefore, if you are owning assets, the expected return is 10% because you are owning assets. Therefore, as compared to the return from money, if the expected return from assets is higher, people will look into converting their money into assets. As a result, the expected return from the money decrement results in the declining of the money demand. Thank you for today. If you have any question, you can press the raise hand button so that I can give you the chance to ask.
ልዩነት መፍጠር ዓላማችን ነው። ዓለም አቀፍ ተወዳዳሪ መሆን አለባችሁ። የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ጥራትና ደረጃውን የጠበቀ ስልጠና በመስጠት ብቁ ዜጋ እያፈራን ነው። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ፣ በቲኬቲንግና ሪዘርቬሽን፣ በሆቴልና ቱሪዝም ሙያዎች አሰልጥነን ተወዳዳሪ እናደርጉታለን። ኮሌጃችን ካናዳ ከሚገኘው ኢንተርናሽናል ኤር ትራንስፖርት አሶሲዬሽን አያታና ከእንግሊዙ አይሲኤም ጋር በመተባበር ዓለም አቀፍ ዕውቅና ያለው ስልጠና እየሰጠ ይገኛል። በፍላይት ኦፕሬሽን፣ በበረራ መስተንግዶ የምንሰጣቸው ስልጠና ከኢትዮጵያ ሲቪል አቪዬሽን ባለስልጣን ሙሉ ዕውቅና አለው። አድራሻ ከጎላጉል ታወር 22 አደባባይ ወደ ሾላ በሚወስደው መንገድ ላይ የናሽናል ኤርዌይስ እህት ኩባንያ ናሽናል አቪዬሽን ኮሌጅ ህልሞን እውን ያደርጋል።